grab the text. Okay. So the original text for the explanations was written around 1,000 years ago, or I should say 900 AD or 1000 AD. Okay, I'm not reading anything else besides the explanation itself. They're very long. And I'm not gonna stress it, I'm just gonna go through it. And I'll try not to read any supplied words. This was originally written in Hindi about 1,000 years ago. The translation is by James Houghton Woods. He went to Harvard. Published in 1927. Almost exactly 198 years ago. 99 years ago, almost exactly 100 years ago. That's special. Okay, I read it. I prostrate myself before him who is the cause of the world's origination, before where shall get to who. Although for him, fruition and other results of karma proceeding from the hindrances have ceased, is yet kindly prostrating myself before Patanjali the sage, I proceed to set forth a brief, clear, and significant explanation of the comment by Vedavyasa. For here, the exalted Patanjali, wishing to announce in brief the import of the book which he is about to begin, that he may thus assist the procedure of men of understanding, and that he may more especially make the hearer easily comprehend, composed this sutra. 1. Now the exposition of yoga. Of this, the first portion, the word now, he discusses in the phrase. The expression now indicates that a distinct topic commences here. The word now is used as in now this is the jyotis. It does not imply that it is to be proceeded. Now by the word exposition he means the authoritative book in the sense that it is that whereby a thing expounded. I'm going to read it again. Now by the word exposition he means the authoritative book in the cause of that it is that whereby a thing is expounded. Moreover, the book may enter upon its activity when preceded not only by Kam and the others, but it must be preceded also by the desire to announce the truth. On the contrary, it would follow when once there had been a desire to know and when the knowledge appears. I hate supplying words. As it is written, after that, calm and subdued and retired and resigned and concentrated, let him behold himself in the self only. Although it would be possible, immediately after advantage had been taken of such things as students' questions or performances of austerities or elixirs of life, they are not mentioned. The reason for this is that these things will be of no use either to the student's knowledge or to the feeling inclined. If the book be authoritative, then even if there are no if the book be authoritative, then even if there are none, the exposition of yoga is to be accepted. But if not authoritative, then even if the book is to be rejected. Thus it is that he refuses to say that immediately after his understanding the truth and his desire to announce. But if it be agreed that a distinct topic commences, then when once yoga has been mentioned as the topic of the book, the student easily understands the announcement of the import of the book as a whole and is started into action. Now everyone knows from Shruti and Smriti and the epics and the Puranas that concentration is the cause of final bliss. Someone might ask, if the word now indicates that a distinct topic commences in all those works to which it is attached, then if this is so, would not such an announcement as now therefore the inquiry into Brahma also be included? To prevent this mistake, he uses the word cure. To prevent this mistake, he uses the word here. Someone cites the King Yah-Usha Smriti. Hiranyuya Galpa and no other of ancient days is he who gave utterance to yoga, and asks how it can be said that Patanjali gives utterance to the authoritative book on yoga. In reply, the author of the sutra says, the exposition in the sense of expounding something previously expounded. When then the word now signifies that here a distinct topic commences, then the point of the statement is quite consistent. Accordingly, he says, the authoritative work which expounds yoga has commenced. Here an objector interrupts. The topic which is commenced here is not the authoritative work, but yoga insofar as it is taught. In reply to which he says, is to be understood. True, we are beginning yoga insofar as it is taught, but the instrument which is to teach this is the authoritative work which deals with the same. Moreover, the teacher's activity has to do more immediately with the instrument than with the thing he works upon. Accordingly, with emphasis upon the activity of the author, we are to understand that the authoritative work, with emphasis upon the activity of the author, we are to understand that the authoritative work which deals with yoga is commenced. But the topic commenced is that yoga only which is limited in its activity by an authoritative work. I can't say that. This is the real point, and one must suppose that the hearing of the word now, which means that a distinct topic has commenced, suggests, like the side of a water jar carried, another meaning. It serves as an auspicious beginning. Doubt as to the actual thing. It is occasioned by doubt as to the meaning of the word. This he removes by stating that yoga is concentration. This he removes by stating that yoga is concentration, is etymologically derived from the stem yuja in the sense of concentration, and not from the stem yuji in the sense of conjunction. Another objection is raised. The yoga which is to be described is a whole. And concentration is a part of it, and a mere part is not the whole. The reply is in the words but this. The word ja has the sense of but, and distinguishes the whole from the part, which belongs to all the stages, refers to the stages or states which are to be described. Matumati, Matupati Kane, Bishopang, Samsikara Shesho. These belong to the mind stuff. These belong to the mind stuff. In all these, there are found that in all these, it is found that yoga, the special mark of which is the restriction. In all these is found that yoga, the special mark of which is the restriction of the mind stuff. But concentration is a part and has not this as its special mark. And the words yoga is concentration are a statement for etymological purposes only, insofar as one is not dwelling upon the difference between the whole and the part. But the practical purpose of what he calls yoga, it is the restriction of the fluctuations of mind stuff. This is the stricter sense of the term. To those who hold the view that fluctuations are sensations inherent in the soul, and that therefore the restriction of them would also involve the soul in which they inhere, to these in rebuttal, he says, a quality of the mind stuff. The term mind stuff he uses as a partial expression for the inner organ, the thinking substance. The point is that the absolutely eternal energy of intellect, immutable, cannot have sensations as its properties, but the thinking substance may have them. An objector says, this may be so, but if yoga belongs to all its stages, why then, sir, the restless and the infatuated and the distracted states also are stages of mind. Sir, the restless and the infatuated and the distracted states also are stages of mind stuff, and there would be among these states, reciprocally at least, also a restriction of fluctuations. Then yoga would have to include these states also. In replying to this difficulty, he makes clear which stages are to be included and which not included by the words beginning with the restless. 1. The restless incessantly thrown by force of rajas upon this or that object is excessively unstable. 2. The infatuated because of a preponderance of dhammas is filled with the fluctuation of sleep. 3. The distracted differs from the restless in that, although prevailingly unstable, it is occasionally stable, this prevailing instability being either natural or generated by diseases and languor and other obstacles later to be described. 4. The single in intent is the focused. 5. The restricted mind stuff is that in which all the fluctuations are restricted, and in which nothing remains but subliminal impressions. In spite of the fact that certain fluctuations of the restless and the infatuated, of these, are restricted each by the others, still, since these two are not even indirectly causes of final bliss, and since they contend against it, they are so far removed from being called yoga that he has not expressly denied that these two are yoga. But in the case of the distracted, since occasionally it has stability when directed towards a real object, he denies that it can be yoga in the words of these stages. When the mind is distracted, the concentration, which is the occasional stability of the mind stuff, when directed to a real object, cannot properly be called yoga. Why? Because it has come under the adverse influence of distraction, which is the opposite of this. When fallen into the hands of a troop of opponents, it is hard for a thing to be even what it is, and it is still harder for it to produce effects. Just as anyone can see that a seed which has fallen into the fire and stay there 3 or 4 moments has not power, even if sown, of sprouting. This is the real meaning. If then concentration, which has come under the adverse influence of distraction, be not yoga, what then is yoga? To this he makes answer, but that which, when the mind is single in intent. By the word real, he excludes imaginary. Since sleep, a fluctuation of mind stuff, is also single in intent with regard to dhammas. Since sleep, a fluctuation of mind stuff, is also single in intent with regard to dhammas, a real object, the peculiar thing upon which it depends. So he says, distinct, which means is clear. So he says distinct, which means is clear, in which the sattva becomes evident in a very high degree. But that thing is not clear, in which the dhammas is in preponderance, inasmuch as it is the cause of hindrances. Now the perception of a thing either by verbal communication or by inference may, we grant, be luminous. Still, insofar as it is immediately known, it does not destroy undifferentiated consciousness, which we directly experience. For in such two moons, or a defective sense of orientation, For in such two moons or a defective sense of orientation, they do not destroy undifferentiated consciousness. Accordingly, he uses the word fully, because it means luminous to the full extent, and because it alludes to immediate perception. I'm going to read it again, sorry. Accordingly, he uses the word fully, because it means luminous to the full extent, and because it alludes to immediate perception. The feeling of personality and the other hindrances have their root in undifferentiated consciousness. Furthermore, since knowledge destroys undifferentiated consciousness, and since when knowledge emerges, the hindrances from undifferentiated consciousness and so on are I'm gonna read it again, sorry, I'm just afraid now. One day I'll never be harassed. So I'm gonna read another sutra after this one. This one's almost done. About 5 minutes left. Okay, here we go. For in such two moons or a defective sense of orientation, they do not destroy undifferentiated consciousness. Accordingly, he uses the word fully, because it means luminous to the full extent, and because it alludes to immediate perception. The feeling of personality and the other hindrances have their root in undifferentiated consciousness. Furthermore, since knowledge destroys undifferentiated consciousness, and since when knowledge emerges, the hindrances from undifferentiated consciousness and so on are destroyed, inasmuch as they are contrary the one to the other, and inasmuch as the cause would be destroyed. Therefore, he says, and causes to dwindle. This then is the reason why it slackens the bonds which consist of kaima. And in this passage, by a figurative use of the cause for the effect, he employs the word kaima, whereas subtle influences are intended. The word slackens means brings down from their operation. For later he says, so long as the wood exists, fruition from it. And finally it sets before it as a goal the restriction. Moreover, since this conscious of objects is fourfold, he employs the words this. I'm not reading anything supplied. If the translator added any words, I'm not reading them. Moreover, since this conscious of objects is fourfold, he employs the word this. He describes it not conscious of objects with the words all the fluctuations. We know that sources of valid ideas and other fluctuations made of rajas and tamas are restricted in conscious, while fluctuations is, see, that's like, no, the sentence doesn't even make sense because I'm not reading it. We know that sources of valid ideas and other fluctuations made of rajas and tamas are restricted in conscious, while fluctuations of sattva are retained, but that in not conscious, all fluctuations whatsoever are restricted. Therefore, it is established that belonging to all stages means occurring in all these stages, matumati and so on, which are included in these two stages. Okay, I'm gonna read one more. Explanation for Sutra number 2, book 1. He introduces the second sutra with the words, the distinguishing characteristic of this. The words of this refer to the two kinds of yoga mentioned in the previous sutra. 2. Yoga is the restriction of the fluctuations of mind stuff. Yoga is that particular state of mind stuff in which sources of valid ideas and the other fluctuations are restricted. Yoga is that particular state of mind stuff in which sources of yeah, it's not fucking letting me, harassing me like a motherfucker. Yoga is that particular state of mind stuff in which I can't even say it because it's fucking dark magic or whatever that fuck he is doing. Stupid ass. Dear God, why don't such people die? Just let them die. They don't deserve to live. Period. Not as humans. In King Yah-Usha's name, Jesus' real name, yoga is that particular state of mind stuff in which sources of valid. Yoga is that particular state of mind stuff in which sources of valid ideas and the other fluctuations are restricted. The objection is made that this cannot be the distinguishing characteristic, since yoga conscious will be excluded. For in this, the fluctuations of mind stuff which have the sattva aspect are not restricted. The reply is by the non-use of the word all. If yoga had been said to be the restriction of all the fluctuations of mind stuff, conscious would not have been included. But the restriction of the fluctuations of mind stuff, which are hostile to the latent deposit of karma from the hindrances, includes this also. Because there is a restriction of those mind stuff's fluctuations which have the rajas and tamas aspect in this also, and because this is a part of that. But why is this mind stuff, which is a single thing, in connection with restless and other stages? And since someone might be in doubt why the fluctuations of mind stuff which is in such state should be restricted, he now makes clear first of all the reason for the connection with the states. Now, mind stuff. Since the aspect sattva has a disposition to vividness, since the aspect rajas has a disposition to activity. Jesus fucking Christ. Now, mind stuff. Since the aspect sattva has a disposition to vividness, since the aspect rajas has a disposition to activity, since the aspect tamas has a disposition to inertia. The use of the word vividness is the use of a part for the whole. It alludes also to other kinds of sattva, to serenity and lightness and joy. And activity alludes to the kinds of rajas, to pain and grief. Inertia is a property of the tamas fluctuation and is opposed to activity. The use of the word inertia is a partial expression for heaviness and covering and dejection and similar states. What he means to say is this: the mind stuff, although a single thing, has, inasmuch as it is made up of three aspects, and inasmuch as the aspects are not in equilibrium, a multitude of mutations arising from a multitude of reciprocal antagonisms, and thus may consistently have many states. He shows that the restless and other stages of the mind stuff have, according to circumstances, a variety of subordinate. He shows that the restless and other stages of the mind stuff have, according to circumstances, a variety of subordinate states. 4. Which is vividness. Mind stuff sattva is sattva in its form as a mutation of mind stuff. This in its form as vividness is thus shown to be a preponderance of. I'm going to read the whole thing. Mind stuff sattva is sattva in its form as a mutation of mind stuff. This in its form as vividness is thus shown to be a preponderance of sattva in the mind stuff. In this mind stuff, when rajas and tamas are somewhat less than the sattva, and when they two are equal each to the other, then it is that thing thus described which acquires a fondness for supremacy and for objects of sense, sound, and so on. Although the mind stuff under the predominance of sattva desires to meditate upon reality, still, when the reality is concealed by tamas, it thinks that such supremacies. I'm gonna read it again. I'm just afraid of loud banging, banging doors all day fucking long, just banging doors. Although the mind stuff under the predominance of sattva desires to meditate upon reality, still, when the reality is concealed by tamas, it thinks that such supremacies as atomization are the reality, and desires to meditate upon them. It meditates a moment, and then, caught by rajas, although obtaining no permanence on them, it gains nothing except a fondness for these things. But its natural inclination towards sound and so on is quite well known. Accordingly, in this way, the mind stuff is said to be distracted. While describing the restless mind stuff, he alludes also to the infatuated. The very same with tamas. Now, when tamas suppresses rajas and extends itself, then, since rajas has become incapable of removing the tamas, which covers the mind stuff. I'm gonna read it. Now, when tamas suppresses rajas and extends itself, then, since rajas has become incapable of removing the tamas, which covers the mind stuff's sattva, the mind stuff covered with tamas tends towards demerit and others. Non-perception is declared to be misconceived perception. Non-perception is declared to be misconceived perception, and also to be sleep perception, which is supported by a cause of a negation. And from this comes the suggestion of the infatuated state also. A failure of its supremacy is an obstruction to one's will in every direction. Thus it is that mind stuff becomes pervaded with demerit and the others. But when the same substance of the mind stuff comes to have its sattva manifest, its cover of tamas removed, is accompanied by rajas, then it tends, as he says, towards merit and perception and passionless and supremacy. As he says in the phrase, dwindled away. I'm gonna read it again. See, I'm not reading any supplied words, so if it sounds funny, the translator should have done a better job 100 years ago. A failure of the supremacy. A failure of its supremacy is an obstruction to one's will in every direction. Thus it is that mind stuff becomes pervaded with demerit and the others. But when this same substance of the mind stuff comes to have its satadeva manifest, its cover of dhammas removed, is accompanied by rajas, then it tends, as he says, towards merit and perception and passionless and supremacy, as he says in the phrase, dwindled away. That is referred to the covering, that is, the dhammas, that is, the infatuation of which has almost entirely dwindled. For the same reason, it is illumined in its totality, in substances as effects, and substances as causes, and in the linga, and the lingin, and the self. Still, it has not the capacity for merit and supremacy since it lacks activity. With regard to this, he says, pervaded by rajas only. In other words, when rajas is the active agent, merit and the rest do persist. Accordingly, for the two middle classes of yogins, the Madhyamika and the Prajna Jyotis, who have attained to concentration conscious, the substance of the mind stuff is included. He now describes the state of the mind stuff of the fourth. Of the fourth class of contemplator. I can't see and I can't. Page and a half left. Getting a little tired. He now describes the state of the mind stuff of the fourth. He now describes the state of the mind stuff of the fourth class of contemplators. The Adhikarananta Pavaniya, with the words the same. Since the stain of the last vestige of rajas is removed, the mind stuff is grounded in itself. Now the goal of the substance of the thinking substance, when once the stain of the rajas and tamas is purified by the joining of the crucible, which are practice and passionlessness, and when it has withdrawn the organs which are concerned with objects of sense, and is grounded in itself, has still a further function to perform, namely, the discriminative discernment, which performs its function insofar as its task is unfinished. I'll read it again. Very difficult sentence. Since the stain of the now the gold of the substance of the thinking substance, when once the stain of the rajas and tamas is purified by the joining of the crucible, which are practice and passionlessness, and when it has withdrawn the organs which are concerned with objects of sense, and is grounded in itself, has still a further function to perform, namely, the discriminative discernment, which performs its function insofar as its task is unfinished. With this in mind, he says the mind stuff. The mind stuff, which is nothing else than the discriminative discernment referring to the Satadeva and the self, tends toward the mind stuff, which is nothing else than the discriminative discernment referring to the Satadeva and the self, tends towards, I can't say towards, taking a little break. Okay, the mind stuff, which is nothing else than the discriminative discernment, referring to the Satadeva and the self, tends towards the contemplation, the rain cloud of things. The rain cloud of the things. The rain cloud of things will also be described. He tells what is perfectly clear to yogins with regard to this in the words, "This is the highest." The mind stuff, which is nothing else than the discernment of the difference between the sattva, the mind stuff, which is nothing else than the discernment of the difference between the sattva and the self, and which lasts until the rain cloud of the things, is designated by contemplators as the highest elevation. And if one does not wish to make the distinction between the substance and its property, it may be regarded as having the same office as the mind stuff. In order to introduce the concentration of restriction as the ground for rejecting the discernment of the difference and as the ground for accepting the energy of intellect, he shows the excellent... I'm gonna read it again. In order to introduce the concentration of restriction as the ground for rejecting the discernment, in order to introduce the concentration of restriction as the ground for rejecting the discernment of the difference and as the ground for accepting the energy of intellect, he shows the excellence of the energy of intellect and the inferior value of the discriminative insight by the phrase, the energy of intellect, and the following words. Impurity has its... I'm gonna read the whole thing again, sorry. Getting a little tired. And somebody's screaming outside. That's how crazy this thing gets. People screaming. In order to introduce the concentration of restriction as the ground for rejecting the discernment of the difference and as the ground for accepting the energy of intellect, he shows the excellence of the energy of intellect and the inferior value of the discriminative insight by the phrase, the energy of intellect, and the following words. Impurity has as its essence. Impurity has as its essence pleasure and pain and infatuation. For even pleasure and infatuation give pain to the man of discrimination. Therefore, like pain, they too are to be escaped. Moreover, exceptional beauty also comes to an end, and so gives pain. Accordingly, that too the man of discrimination can only reject. Since this same impurity and this coming to an end do not occur in the energy of intellect, the self, it is said to be undefiled and unending. An objection is made. How can this be free from defilement, if, in being aware of things which have as their essence pleasure and pain and infatuation, it assumes their form? And how can it be unending if it accepts and rejects their forms? In reply, it is said, it has objects shown to it. It is that to which the various objects are shown. That would be sound if, like the thinking substance, the energy of intellect assumed the form of objects. But it is the thinking substance only which, because it undergoes mutations in the form of the objects, shows the object to the energy of intellect, which does not take their form. Yeah, whatever. Part of me wants to read it again. Yeah, I'll read it again. That would be sound if, like the thinking substance, the energy of intellect assumed the form of objects. But it is the thinking substance only which, because it undergoes mutations in the form of the objects, shows the object to the energy of intellect, which does not take their form. And when this happens, the self is then said to become aware. The objector asks, how can the energy of intellect, unless it strike upon the thinking substance, which has taken the form of some object, know the object? Or if it do strike upon the object, how is it that it does not undergo a change into the form of that. To this he replies, does not unite. Union is contagion. Not any of this is an intellect. This is his meaning. If anyone asks why there is none of this, the reply is, it is immutable. Mutation, which has the threefold character of external, I can't say external. Mutation, which has the threefold character of external aspect and time variation and intensity, does not appertain to the intellect, also in any such way that, by passing into a mutation in the form of an action, the energy of intellect should mutate in correspondence with the thinking substance. That it, even if it does not unite, can be conscious of objects, it will now show to be possible. This is established, that the energy of thought is unsullied by them. I'm not adding any words except maybe them and it and things. This is established, that the energy of thought is unsullied by them. But it has been said that the discriminative discernment, since it has as its essence the substance of the thinking substance, is not unsullied. I'll read that again. But it has been said that the discriminative discernment, since it has as its essence the substance of the thinking substance. But it has been said that the discriminative discernment, since it has as its essence. Tired. Almost done. Okay, about half a page left. And since But it has been said that the discriminative discernment, since it has as its essence the substance of the thinking substance, is not unsullied. It is contrary to this, and it is contrary to this energy of intellect. And since even the discriminative discernment, is to be rejected, and since even the discriminative discernment is to be rejected, then how can you make mention of the other fluctuations which abound in defects? This is the real meaning. Thence, for this reason, the introduction of the concentration of restriction is fitting. And so he says, hence, with this. The meaning is that he restricts even the discriminative. The meaning is that he restricts even the discriminative discernment by the higher passionlessness, which surely is nothing more than the complete calming of the perceptions. The meaning is that he restricts even the discriminative discernment by the higher passionlessness, which surely is nothing more than the complete calming of the perceptions. Complete calming of the perceptions. Now, what kind of a mind stuff would that be that has all its fluctuations restricted? In reply, he says, this state. He speaks of that. The state of which has restriction. He tells what restriction itself is. This is the seedless. This is the seedless. This is the seedless. The latent deposit of kaima, which corresponds to the latent deposit of kaima, which corresponds with the hindrances, birth and length of life and kind of enjoyment, is the seed. That which is exempt from this is seedless. For this same, he indicates the proper technical term which is current among yogins when he says, in this state nothing. He sums up with the words, the yoga, the restriction of the fluctuations of the mind stuff is twofold. Okay, I'm done. Thank you. I'm tired. So it does help. So it comes from this book, Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. The same translation that I use for Sanskrit translations, but this was written in Hindi and it's translated into English. Sorry, I'm tired. Thank you. Have a good day. Namaste. That's referred to going skateboarding right now, I think. It's like 98 degrees out. Okay, thank you.